Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
Previously on Coffee with Kenobi.
Also joining us on today's show is Entertainment Weekly writer and the author of Brutal Youth, Anthony Bresnikan.
May the force be with you.
And you as well, too. That's always a tricky one to respond to. As soon as you feel like you're in charge, you don't know how to respond.
That is very tricky.
I like it. That's a good word.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
And may the force be with each and every one of you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 161. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, rhetoric, and the best travel tips this side of the galaxy. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my Star Wars Run Disney mug from 2017. It features Darth Vader prominently with the Death Star and the Death Star gunners underneath him, and it is a gorgeous black mug. Coffee with Kenobi is brought to you by MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. For all of your travel needs to the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines, as well as anywhere you want to go on vacation, be sure to go to www.mousefantravel.com. On CWK, I invite you to join me as we think about the mythology of Star Wars in a whole new way, and maybe laugh a little bit in the process. You are here with your Star Wars family as we go to our favorite coffee shop and talk Star Wars. On today's show, Randy Therio and Dennis Keithley join us as we talk about our top 5 favorite Legends line books from the Star Wars universe. And Tom brings us the latest news. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
And now, let's see what's brewing in the Star Wars universe this week.
Less than 90 days to go for Star Wars Celebration, and we have the official Coffee with Kenobi Celebration Chicago logo coming to you very soon. Corey Clubb is working on it as we speak, and I cannot wait to share that with each and every one of you. Be on the lookout for our official Celebration Chicago Coffee with Kenobi logo coming very, very soon on our social media pages, and who knows, if you're a Patreon member, maybe you'll get a sneak peek at it before anyone else.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Before we join Dennis and Randy for our conversation about the Star Wars Legends line, my microphone experienced a bit of a hang-up with some Minox apparently, so it will sound a little bit different than normal, but you can hear me clearly, albeit a little bit differently from the normal show. So without further ado, here we go. Joining us today for a cup of coffee are 2 returning hosts to Coffee with Kenobi that everyone is very familiar with. First, let's bring in the co-host of Legends Library, Randy Therio.
Hey guys. Hey Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Good to have you back on the show for a cup of coffee.
Well, I certainly appreciate the invite because this is a really special topic for me. So thank you so much.
Well, I think so. And I don't know if listeners have necessarily put it together, but Randy is the only person who has been on the show more than Corey.
Wow. Because
you're on the end of every segment because you did our outro.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Kind of like the Tom Kane thing.
That's right. Tom Kane at the beginning, you at the end. You're the closer.
Yeah. Right. Except for he's got a cooler voice.
Well, I mean, I suppose that's debatable. You both have your very, very powerful talents. Speaking of very powerful talents, we also have with us the co-host of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels, Dennis Keithley.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back. It's good to get back so quickly after my last appearance here and I have a voice this time. So I'm anxious to get into this topic with both of you.
Oh, I am looking forward to it as well. You have certainly gargled since the last time you were on.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better. Thanks.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Our topic for today, as I said at the very top of the show, is our top 5 books from the Legends line. And we ran into some interesting challenges. We went through our top 5 of all the movies. Then Christmas rolled around. We got to talk with James Arnold Taylor. 2019, the first show, we had Clayton Sandell and Anthony Bresnikan on. So we had topics that were really fun, really engaging, a lot of great feedback. My students were on. But the top 5s, we got a lot of questions about when are those coming back. They're back. We don't have movies to talk about just yet, but there's a lot of Star Wars that is untapped. So it's kind of trying to narrow it down and give you the quality show that you deserve. And we have found a good one. We are going to go through our top 5 books from the Legends line. Now, this is a daunting one, Randy, because how many Legends books would you say there are ballpark?
Ballpark over 200.
Yes, and we're narrowing them down to 5. Now, I have read a good chunk of them. I'm sure not as many as Randy has, so it's you still, nevertheless, how many you've read, there's a lot to choose from. So narrowing it down to a top 5 might be daunting. Maybe we should have done it by different 10-year gaps or something like that. But we're going to start with this for now and see how it goes. And Randy, we'll have you start. What is the number 5 on your list? Because we are going, as we did not do with the films, we're going to go from top 5. We're going to go with number 5, 4, 3, 2, all the way down to our top one at the end of the show.
Okay. My number 5 then. It just so happens this is a book that we are reviewing this month, and that this episode will release in just a couple days. It's Revelation, and it's part of the Legacy of the Force series, and it's written by Karen Traviss. And at this point, I'm not sure. With Legends Library, we've kind of I've tried not to spoil books that we haven't reviewed. But since this is a different show, I'll just go ahead and throw out I don't know. Should I go ahead and throw out the spoilers or the things about the book that I like, or I don't know?
I think you're probably safe. You can always tell people we can fast forward a few minutes if you don't want to hear specifically about that book. But yeah, I think you're okay.
Yeah. So the whole idea is, that this is the part. This is not the book where Jason and Jaina Solo, or I should say Darth Kaitis and Jaina Solo fight the epic duel. This is the book before that. And what's really special about this book is that the juxtaposition of Jaina Solo, because she has learned all that she can to become an amazing Jedi, and she's been given the name the Sword of the Jedi. However, to beat Darth Kaitis, her twin brother, she's going to have to learn an extra set of skills, and she ends up going to Boba Fett, and the Mandalorians actually train her, and she is able to gain a new set of skills to take on her twin brother, and it's and then the development of Ben Skywalker and him coming to his own and proving who the killer, who killed his mother, all of that, the drama and the emotional ties and the fact that Boba Fett is involved in that, and Karen Traviss is writing Mandalorian stuff. It's the good stuff. And so my number 5 is Revelation by Karen Traviss.
Which is something of a revelation to me, because I'm not familiar with that book. That sounds really super cool.
Oh man, this whole series, the whole Legacy of the Force series is why I started Legends Library. And
no
sadly,
kidding.
Yeah, it's sadly we're coming to the close. We've got one more book after this, and that will be, and it'll be kind of an identity crisis for me, because it's always been something that I've kind of looked off into the future, like someday. And now we're gonna finish that series, and it'll be it'll take some soul searching for me to kind of find out what I actually want to talk about next as far as Legends books.
Wow. Okay, yeah. That's cool. Dennis, what is your number 5?
Well, I really like Randy's choice. That series was important to me as well, especially with Lumia's appearance throughout the whole thing. That was a good one. I really struggled trying to rank my top 5, and my list was actually 10 books, and finally I just had to arrange them, so I did. And if you ask me tomorrow, this might be my number 1, but I am going with Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. And this is what got me back into the Legends universe when I was in high school a couple decades ago. And I remember sitting in a chemistry class, and one of my classmates wandered in with that book under her arm. And I looked at the cover and I was like, wait a minute, what is that? Because I knew everything about Star Wars and I had no clue that this book even existed. So she started telling me about it. And the very first thing I did after school was drove to the mall, went to the B. Dalton bookstore and picked up my own copy and read it cover to cover. And it was so wonderful to have new Star Wars at that time. And a lot of us, we refer to that as the dark times because we were in between movies. We weren't sure we were ever getting more Star Wars. And having that story with a new villain like Thrawn and getting Mara Jade introduced, That's kind of the book that kicked off what we think of as that Legends line today. And it got so many people back into being big Star Wars fans and following what was going on in that galaxy. So that's my number 5.
That I think I got mine to beat Alton as well. A lot of these old books definitely did that for us, because that's part of the tradition. Was you go into the Beat Alton bookstore or Walden Books, and you're just the smell of the fresh books, and it's pretty great. I think a lot of my memories of the Legends line, of course, we're talking about the expanded universe as well. It ties into those memories of walking into those bookstores and picking those things up, and just that whole experience. And you signing up, reserving books sometimes. I remember I think we had to reserve once the Thrawn trilogy got towards the end.
Yeah, it was just, like I said, it was just such a pleasant surprise finding that this was out there. And of course, as a kid, I had plenty of my own adventures with Luke, Han, and Leia with my action figures after Return of the Jedi, and thinking about what came next. But then having this wonderfully developed world with the remnants of the Empire, and the situation kind of reversed, that the rebellion became the Republic, and they were in control, and the Empire was the one that was now trying to conquer things. And so it's kind of what most stories are. You have an evil force that's trying to take over, as opposed to one that's in control to begin with. So it was just a fun change, and I love seeing Luke's further development as a Jedi, and what was going on with Han and Leia and their marriage, and expecting twins at the time. And so again, it was just it's one of those things that captured my imagination right at the right time.
I feel like, Randy, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I feel like this book might come up later. It's possible.
It will. Yes.
Yes. I sense a disturbance in the force in a good way. My number 5, I think, is going to be somewhat of a surprise for you guys, and maybe for our listeners. It is Honor Among Thieves. Wow. It's a fairly recent book to the Legends line, a few years before they went to everything being canonical and basically creating, redefining the expanded universe as the Legends line. But the reason I put this book is not necessarily because it's the best one or has the most powerful, important moment for Han Solo's career in the Legends library. But I just love that when I was reading this, it felt like the old Han Solo novels, the old Marvel Comics stories, which had Han Solo and Chewbacca and their adventures, and then the voice of all of the characters in this story, particularly Solo and Leia, felt so rich and authentic that I could hear Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. And the thing that was always daunting for me, as far as allowing myself to fully give into the Legends line, was that I sometimes felt like the presentation of the big three was never quite how I envisioned them to be on the big screen. But with Honor Among Thieves, I felt like I had a classic Solo story that felt like it was a part of his mythology from the old days, and I could see it being something projected on the big screen. And I just found it to be quite fun.
I have to admit, I think I missed this one when it came out. And
really?
Yeah, I've read most of the Legends books that are out there. And as I was saying earlier, when I was trying to come up with my list, I spent an awful lot of time looking at my shelves trying to narrow this down. But somehow I missed this one. And I've read the description, and I've meant to pick it up. But your endorsement is going to move it up higher on my to-read list.
Oh, cool. I look forward to hearing what you think. It's James S.A. Corey is the author, and it's one of the first books that we ever reviewed for Coffee with Kenobi. So it has a kind of a special place in my heart. I remember reading it while the kids were at a trampoline park and they were jumping around for hours. So I sat there and read the whole book.
Is James Corey the pseudonym for two people? Am I thinking of the right author?
I have the book behind me. Let me check. While I check that, unless Randy, you know off the top of your head.
Yeah, it is. I don't know the authors, but it is a duo. And also that was like you said, at the tail end of the expanded universe before things were kind of reset or whatever. And so there was supposed to be a book that came out, a book that was like it was Razor's Edge was Leia, and then Han Solo, Honor Among Thieves, and then there was supposed to be a third one that was kind of, I think, somewhat rebranded, because right there, after those two books had been released, right there, that's when everything changed, and all the new books became canon, and that's when Heir to the Jedi came out. And so that third of that trilogy ended up being canon, where the first two were left behind in Legends.
That's right. And they were sort of marketed as something of a trilogy, but the only thing they have in common is that they have the word Star Wars in them. That was it. They weren't a trilogy at all.
They were standalone, definitely.
It showcased the big three. And okay, so I found my press release that was sent to me by Lucas Books hardcover. And the two authors writing as James Corey are Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank.
Okay.
Yeah. So this came out in March 2014.
Yeah, Randy's explanation jogged my memory that I think I intended to read these, but then when they announced that they were resetting with a new canon, I decided to postpone reading them, and then just never got around to doing that in Razor's Edge. But now I'm going to have to check those out, because I do enjoy still going back and checking out those Legends, because there's an awful lot of good stories there.
Oh, yeah. Randy, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is interchangeable with my 3, so 3 and 4 is definitely here. But I went with Traitor, written by Matthew Stover, and it's in the middle of the longest series. And honestly, if Legacy of the Force was what got me into really wanting to podcast, then the Yuuzhan Vong series was wanted me to get out of it. It was so long, and I struggled so much to get through that. But there is this gem of a book in the middle of this series, and it brought up so many things, as so many topics, and the tone. The gist of the story is Jason Solo has been captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, and like 30 or 50 years before, a Jedi by the name of Vergere, and you can actually read the backstory in Rogue Planet. There's a book called Rogue Planet, where Vergere has been lost into in the outskirts and in the unknown regions. But Jason Solo is captured and is put in what's called the embrace of pain, and then this Jedi / dark Jedi Vergere basically puts Jason through the embrace of pain, and there's a crisis of I want to say crisis of worldview, if there is such a thing, or a crisis of character and inner conflict that this book presents to the reader and to Jason Solo as the main character, as to what's good and what's evil, what is it that we as readers should be cheering for, who is the overall antagonist in the whole Legends line and the whole Legends timeline, who's the antagonist and who's the protagonist. And what it really boils down to is the good is defined as the will of the Force. And so it's almost theological in nature, and it is so deep and so riveting. And it only takes place in like 2 different settings, 2 or 3 different settings. But the conversation between Vergere and Jason Solo, and intermingled with this embrace of pain, Vergere inflicting pain on Jason to break him down and to cause him to put aside his preconceived ideas, and to really embrace this agenda that Vergere is trying to push on him. And it eventually is the catalyst for him turning to the dark side later on. So it's a profound book, and we bumped into it. It was just in part of the series, and when we got to it, all of us that read it, we were like, "No way! This book is a game changer." So that's my number 4.
Okay, I'm already super thrilled that we have this topic, because this is much richer than I even dreamed. Very, very good. Dennis, what is your 4th one?
My fourth one is also from the New Jedi Order, and it is The Unifying Force, which was the concluding novel of that series. As Randy was suggesting, there was a lot of books that in that series, and some were hit and miss. Traitor was a good one. I remember struggling with that one, and that book really sticking with me for quite a while, trying to figure out what everything meant. But then the Unifying Force is when the Republic and the Jedi finally confront Lord Shimra of the Yuuzhan Vong and determine that there's actually a puppet behind the throne, and they win this war that took over Randy, 3 years or so to get through the entire series. It took a long time, and
way longer to read it.
Yeah, and I remember one of the things that thrilled me so much about that book was that the series on a whole had kind of focused to a great deal on the younger Jedi. It was kind of the rise of Jaina and Jason. Anakin Solo was in there a lot before he perished in the middle of it. There was a lot of deaths of key characters throughout. And while Luke and Han and Leia were in the series, they were often secondary characters. But this kind of saw them come back to the forefront. And as far as I'm concerned, book for book, James Luceno has always been the best Star Wars author. And so he wrote this concluding novel. There's a fantastic scene where Luke is just kind of cutting loose with the Force and working hard to end this war at the end. And I remember being very satisfied at the end of it. And that entire journey of the New Jedi Order was worth it when I got to the end and had an opportunity to reflect back on that few years of reading, because that's pretty much all Legends was at the time, was the New Jedi Order. And it was so deep and very challenging to get through at times. But then that book was a nice capstone to the whole thing.
I totally agree with that. And that same book, Rogue Planet, that also has a connection. It's wild. Rogue Planet, just the way it appears, it looks like it doesn't fit as far as art wise, and like presentation and marketing wise. It seems like it's kind of like a throw-in book, but the foundation in Rogue Planet that is laid down for the book you just mentioned and for Traitor, there really was an expansion of, for me anyway, there was an expansion of imagination to where you could see like, this is really cool. So that the unifying force at the end started way back when Anakin Skywalker went on his first mission with Ben Kenobi. Mm-hmm. And so that long story arc, and then have a sub story arc of the Yuuzhan Vong within that is very cool. Very cool.
That was the first expanded universe book to be in the prequel era too, because that came out after The Phantom Menace.
Huh. Yeah, I don't even know when that book. I remember buying it. You really? That's really cool.
Oh yeah. My wife can be surprised how many random things I can remember, because I certainly can't remember other stuff. But I can remember all these things. My number 4, another one that's very seemingly random, is Lockdown. Now, I'm not the world's biggest Darth Maul fan. I like him. I think he's cool. I think the Rebels add a lot to him, and certainly meeting Ray Park helps to make that character more powerful for me. But this is a book that I'd say we're maybe 6 months to a year into the show, and we had the author Joe Schreiber on. Yeah, Joe Schreiber. And this is a book that's it's billed as a horror novel. There have been a couple other Star Wars horror novels, but this one is I don't know if it's horror so much as very bloody, because basically the premise is that Darth Maul goes undercover and he is in a prison and he is not allowed to use the Force, and he becomes something of a gladiator, and he can't use the Force, but he can just be himself and use his combat techniques and his just fierceness. And of course he climbs up the ranks rather quickly. He takes over sort of the criminal element in the prison, which is something of a harbinger of what's going to happen when he evolves in the canonical Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, he has something of a love interest, which at least they kind of leave it out there for a sequel. That obviously never came to pass, at least at the time of this recording. But it was captivating to me, and it has over 85 chapters, but each chapter is like 2 or 3 pages long. And I remember talking to the author about this and saying that I really like that style because it becomes less daunting. Sometimes when you're reading a book and it's getting to be towards the end of the evening and you're tired and you're thinking, all right, I got to get through this chapter. There's 8 pages left. Well, with a book like that, that's no big deal. You could get through 3 or 4 more chapters because they're just so short. There's just a very clever way to design and produce a book. And it was very engaging, and it was an interesting way to look at Maul, and I found it a lot of fun.
That's a great choice. I read that book for the first time this past October. We did it for our Halloween episode of Starship Sabers and Scoundrels, and we read right. Schreiber's other 2 books, Death Troopers and Red Harvest, the previous 2 Halloweens. And you know what? This one, when I had first heard about it, was like Maul's in a prison. Pass. But then Jay and Taxis kept pushing it that this is something we need to read. We need to read. And I was so glad I did. And speaking of the Vong, as we just covered in the previous 2 selections this round, there was a cameo of one to start off that book. And that and it wasn't named as such, but the description left it little possibility that could be anything else. And I remember once I got into that, it's just I had to find out who this person was that they were searching for in the prison, what it was that he had that was so important. And Schreiber did just a fantastic job building up the suspense and the intrigue from page 1 of that book.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. I recommend you listening to our interview with him from a few years ago. He has some interesting things to say about sort of structure and narrative too. So let's go ahead and take our first break. This segment ended up being even more rich than I dreamed. So thank you guys for bringing your A games. I can't wait to hear what you have for the next 3 selections. So when we come back, we'll give our third and second favorite books from the Legends line. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Fairly regularly, I get asked by a lot of members of our Coffee with Kenobi family, hey, how can I help support the show? I love what you're doing. How do you guys do this show? How do you make it happen? How can you possibly afford to do the things you're doing? Well, a big way that we were able to do this is because of our CWK Patreon contributors. I'd love to thank Dennis Keithley, Rebecca Raven, Terry Lee, Chris Skavarka, Angela Sauce, Wayne Booker, Aaron Harris, Melinda Wolf, Ben Elkington, Yancey Evans, Mediocre Jedi, Connie Shee, BJ Smith, Caroline Maselli, Christian Dale, Nick Deco, LJ Souter, Chris Metz, Jason Hall, Tim Bungaroth, Mark Suter, Mike Audette, Eric Struthers, Daz Davies, Jared Cantor, Brian McKinney, Thea Selby, and Jeff Ellis. Everyone that I mentioned here, including a number of other members of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon page, give us a monthly donation, which goes towards a lot of things for our show. Travel, podcast equipment, behind the scenes things, upkeep for the website, and so many other things that wouldn't be possible without their help and their patronage. But it's not just their generosity in knowing that they support the show, it's also the fact that they get awesome benefits from being a member of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon family. The biggest thing is CWK Pour Over, which is a show you can listen to for just $5 a month. It's an exclusive show with myself, Tom Gross, and Corey Club, where we talk about popular culture and exciting topics in the world of Star Wars, superheroes, movies, television, things that are streaming, and all kinds of great stuff. In fact, here is a clip from this week's exclusive show.
I do love that, Corey. That's a secret show. It is a secret show.
It is a secret show.
It's a secret we want everyone to be in.
Yeah, of course.
We sure do. Yes, we sure do.
And speaking of secrets, let's reveal some of our secrets. We talked a little bit last time about our 2019 to-do list or our wish list of sorts. Tom gave us a great rundown of all his comings and goings of the year he's looking forward to. And we'll kick it off with Dan. Do you have anything that you need to report in on that you're looking forward to this year?
Tom's was really something I've been thinking about all week. So thanks again for putting your time and effort into that, because I thought that was cool because you covered basically. We've got a teaser there. If you want to know what he covered as well as what I talked about for the things I'm looking forward to in 2019 and Corey Club as well, be sure to tune in to our Coffee with Kenobi CWK pour over. Again, it is our exclusive show, which you can find at www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi. Also on Patreon, by the way, if you are a member of Coffee with Kenobi's Patreon page, there is an exclusive message board where you can send us messages and have conversations with us about the future of the show, as well as CWK pour over and so many other things. There also is a place where you can get access to t-shirts, coffee mugs, get a chance to host this show with me 4 times in 1 month, and you'll be able to see CWK Lens, which is my snapshot, which will feature videos and images of behind-the-scenes things that happen on Coffee with Kenobi. So again, go to www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to find out how you can support our show. One Nation Coffee is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. It smells amazing and tastes even better. They even have a subscription service that is really convenient. Be sure to go to www.onenationcoffee.com and enter the code Kenobi10 to get 10% off your first order. This is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back, and we are back to Dennis. Dennis, you're on your third choice for the top 5 books from the Legends line. What do you have for us?
Well, I am going to go with another novel by James Luceno, and that would be Labyrinth of Evil, which is a direct prequel to Revenge of the Sith. I was trying to figure out why this book appealed to me so much, and I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it exactly, but when it boils down to it, I just like the take that Luceno had on these events that led directly to that confrontation over Coruscant at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. Luceno is a fantastic storyteller. This was a book that had a lot of intrigue in it and suspense. And if you had not seen the prequels, there was kind of a interesting half reveal of who Sidious was that came in the book. And I could see from that perspective, if you didn't know, how amazing of a story that could have been for someone who was just kind of getting into Star Wars there. But I've read that one a couple times now. And like I said, it's hard to pin down why I like it so much, but it's just been one of my favorites.
You know, that is one of the books I got for Christmas years and years ago. I've actually never read it. I've always wanted to. I love the cover. I love the author, but I just never have read it. So you're helping me move that up the list too.
You would love it. The whole the backstory of Palpatine getting captured and ending up in the hands of Dooku or whatever, that whole story and how that came about, and the tension of Palpatine needing to allow himself to get captured, is just it's so cool and it's so intense. And then the audiobook is Jonathan Davis, and he does an incredible job of narrating that book as well, which I should let everybody know. Like, sometimes, most of the time, I'm listening to audiobooks. Sometimes I read the books. Traitor I read cover to cover, but that book is really cool. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Dennis.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I have to agree with about Jonathan Davis. He is my favorite narrator for the audiobooks when it comes to Star Wars. He just does a fantastic job.
He's pretty great. So, Randy, what is your number 3?
Okay, so my number 3 would be Outbound Flight.
Really cool.
Yeah, especially there's a new appreciation for Outbound Flight after the first Thrawn book that came out. If you haven't read Outbound Flight, then you don't get the little the little cherry on top of the sundae when you're reading the first Thrawn of the new Thrawn novels, or where the Chiss Ascendancy has a little bit of a cameo at the very end in the epilogue, and to see both sides of it's Talon Card and George Cardass, right? Those two guys. So they had a thing. They had kind of a they were business partners or whatever. Just all of that is just so cool. And again, there's another connection with Liu Yuzhan Vong, and the Outbound Flight is the first time where we see that maybe Palpatine kind of had it right. Maybe Sidious had it right, because he knew of a threat that was coming, and so he had to get ready because there was a threat from the outside of the galaxy coming. And so it was time for him to get his ducks in a row, because there was a powerful force coming in, and Outbound Flight was that was the first time it was alluded to that maybe Palpatine kind of was, maybe we should have been cheering for him because if he wins, maybe he's better equipped to deal with the Yuzhan Vong than Luke and the Jedi are.
Huh. We'll talk about from a certain point of view. When I was doing some prep for the show, when I would Google, top lists that people had of the Legends line to try to refresh my memory on any books I might have missed, Outbound Flight kept coming up, and I've never read that one, because that's just a one shot, basically, isn't it?
I would say it's a prequel, I guess, to the Heir to the Empire.
Really? But sort of it wasn't originally the intent, but they went back and made that one later, right?
Yes, that was after. It was supposed to be. There was a kind of a combination of books with Outbound Flight and choices of one. I forget kind of the combination of books that Zahn was going to kind of like finish off with. It was Outbound Flight, Survivor's Quest, and one other book there, and he was gonna bundle them all together and write one final book and just like blow our minds with this big conclusion of these different, and he wasn't given the opportunity. Thankfully, now he's been kind of allowed to kind of enter into the world again. Right. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, very good. Well, my number 3 is Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. This book is so close to when they made the novels canonical that it almost feels like it, but it's not. That doesn't take away from the power or poignancy of it. However, the premise is that Obi-Wan Kenobi is, of course, on Tatooine watching over a young Luke Skywalker. And this is a glimpse into what happens and what he does while he's watching over Luke, and how he takes care of himself, and how he tries to connect with Qui-Gon Jinn, and just little adventures and things that happen to him. It's got an old Western feel. It's got one of my favorite twists in any Star Wars story ever, involving the head Tusken Raider. I won't reveal what the twist is, but it is really fantastic and a brilliant example of the power of writing that is just unforgettable to me. On a personal note, he is the first guest I ever booked for Coffee with Kenobi, John Jackson Miller. So he'll always have a special place in my heart, and of course, because the name is Kenobi, and the name of this podcast is, the rumor has it's Coffee with Kenobi. So that always was something that was really, really cool to me. It still holds up beautifully. I know that when, originally when there was talk, the director was hired to make a Kenobi standalone film. They had all kinds of things ready, and they'd done a lot of scouting. That there was always a sincere hope amongst a lot of us that it would be inspired from John Jackson Miller's novel. It's a great treat.
Yeah, that was one that came out towards the end of the Legends line, and I remember picking that one up and being impressed with it because it did have that old Western feel to it. With him just kind of out in the desert, managing a homestead and hiding out from the Empire and trying to lay low, but getting drawn back in to events there on Tatooine, whether he really wanted to or not. And yeah, it does have a great twist with the Tuskens in there, and it was one of those that I kind of kept expecting when we were in kind of that limbo phase where we didn't really know what was going to happen with all the books that were Legends. That at one point, some people thought that they were going to brand some of them as canon, and this is one I kept expecting to end up in that category because it just felt like it could fit in any version of events. And it was a good read.
Very, very good read.
The meditation moments when he's meditating. Those are the thing. Those moments are the moments that stand out from the whole book. Was great. I totally agree. It's a great book.
It was hard to know where to put that one, but I think when you see my next two, it'll all make sense. So Randy, we're gonna go back to you for your number 2.
Okay, so my number 2 is Heir to the Empire, and so it's in the top 5, which is really cool. So my number 2 is Heir to the Empire, and we probably the Heir to the Empire has been talked about every which way. Maybe a little bit unique perspective or presentation of Heir to the Empire for me was, and here's a spoiler alert for Mara Jade, but it's already out there. So during the Legacy of the Force series, gosh, I feel so bad doing this, but I'm just going to say it. All right. So during the Legacy of the Force series, Mara Jade, her life comes to an end. And so as soon as I finished that particular book, I went right back to Heir to the Empire, and I listened to the whole book in its entirety. And those 2 books were back to back because I grieved when she died, and I couldn't believe that she had died in the.
Was that a Zahn book where she died?
No. It was Sacrifice. Sacrifice. It was Karen Travis.
Was it Karen Travis? Yeah.
I think it was Karen. Yeah, it was Karen Travis. Jeez. Oh, Luke's gonna kill me if I got that wrong. But anyway, so yeah, it was a Zahn character killed off by someone else, which is, that's kind of part of the deal. So I went back and I listened to Heir to the Empire, and just because I didn't want. That's how badly I didn't want Mara Jade to die, because she ended up to be one of my favorite characters, and still is. So,
you remember the speculation at that time when that novel was coming out, and everybody knew that Jason was going to kill a major character in order to ascend to the Sith. And there was teases that it was going to be Luke. There was teases that it was going to be Han or Leia. And then they put Mara Jade on the cover of that book, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's too obvious." Yeah. And so, and then I remember, I remember being affected by that scene as well, and it was beautifully tragically written, and
totally agree.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe that they did that to Luke, because Mara and Luke were husband and wife at the time. But yeah, Heir to the Empire is where we got her to begin with, and did a great job establishing her.
Right.
2 interesting points of view on this real quickly before we go on. One, we're talking about Heir to the Empire, and Thrawn didn't come up at all in this particular conversation. Not what we talked about earlier when Dennis mentioned it. And also, I always forget that Timothy Zahn is responsible for Mara Jade. It completely slips my mind. I always think of Thrawn, but no, he's just as responsible for Mara Jade.
And one of my favorite characters, Admiral Pelion, as well.
Oh yeah,
who I really appreciate, and really as he got older, and he became a man of principle and character, almost kind of like the same feeling of like the respect of like a World War II vet, that kind of like appreciation for him as a character as well. So yeah, there's all kinds of Talon Card. I mean, we could go on. We could just do a whole episode. Well, we've done. I'm sure there's been enough podcast episodes about Heir to the Empire that
it'd be fun to do a deep dive of that book for this show too. I've never done that. That might be fun to revisit.
Fun.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and whenever I hear Pelion, I always think of the intro to Legends Library.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
But, okay, so that was your number 2. Dennis, what is your number 2?
Well, I just realized this is going to be my 3rd book in a row by James Luceno, but it is Darth Plagueis. I am actually a very big fan of the Jedi, but you wouldn't know it from this list the way it's turning out. But I prefer them to the Sith, and all apologies to my co-host Darth Taxis. But this book, again, it was one when it came out on the shelves. It's like, okay, it's kind of interesting. I'm not certain how much we need a story about Plagueis, other than the fact that we knew he was Sidious's master. And of course, he gets that mention during Revenge of the Sith that, the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. And of course, it wasn't a story that the Jedi would tell, that he grew so powerful that the only thing he became afraid of was losing his power. And he did. His apprentice killed him in his sleep. And so I couldn't imagine how those few lines would turn out to be an interesting book, but it was absolutely incredible. It's a kind of a take on the rule of two and what that meant to the Sith. And while Plagueis was looking forward to kind of putting an end to that, and is not so much as having an apprentice, but having a partner and taking over the galaxy so that he can conduct some of his experiments into mortality, Sidious took on this whole notion that the Sith are designed to combat the Jedi, and the best way to do that is through deception and secrecy. And he realized that moment when Plagueis was no longer worth it, that he had become more powerful and he needed to get him out of the way. And just it was a fresh way of kind of looking at a lot of the events of the Phantom Menace as well. And I like that we had this behind the scenes look at what the Sith were doing while our Jedi heroes were trying to get the Queen to Coruscant and then fight a battle on Naboo.
That's the most joyful or most entertaining and I don't know what the word is, the most fulfilling idea or part in, or I don't know what I'm trying to say. The most fulfilling concept in that book is that, for me, is that that book ends almost at the end of Phantom Menace, and it did bring Phantom Menace into a different light. And so I remember listening to it, and as it continued to progress, even into the timeline of Phantom Menace, just that it became more and more and more compelling. Is it like, what is he still alive? Is he,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Well, so my number 2 is Heir to the Empire. So now that pretty much, so that's the first one that all three of us have. This one is special to me. And Dennis, you mentioned it kind of brought you back into the fold. I think that for me, this book and the Power of the Force line from 1995 action figures made me feel like Star Wars was back. And really, this was kind of what brought out of the, the dark times. This is what a lot of us like to officially label the times between Return of the Jedi and really when we knew that Episode 1 was going to be made and created. I went to a bookstore and I saw this book, and the way it was displayed, I mean, there was some smattering of books, but nothing really of particular note. I mean, this really kind of started the expanded universe for all intents and purposes. I know we've got the book Explorer of the Mind's Eye. That really is the official one that started, but this is the one that made it mainstream and something of a regular occurrence. I was not a person to gravitate towards any books that were not canonical because my Star Wars was on the silver screen. So I resisted the notion of there being a Star Wars book. But I saw the cover and it was so beautiful, and I'd heard it takes place after Return of the Jedi, and someone had told me, or I guess someone got the impression, I don't really recall that part, that it was wonderful and it was a very loving homage to Star Wars, and it continues Luke's story. And I knew that it wasn't canonical, but I knew I got to see kind of the further adventures of Luke and Han and Leia and Chewbacca in this wonderful world that I grew up being so devout to. And so I read it, and I was completely transfixed by it. And it became something where when the new ones came out, the next two came out, I made sure to go the first day and grab the hardcovers. I never did get the hardcover for Heir to the Empire, by the way. That's kind of a bummer. But it was just something that was so captivating to me. I liked Grand Admiral Thrawn. I thought he was cool. I really liked is the Nograi. That's how you pronounce it, right? Nograi? Nogri? Sure. Bless you. Yeah. And so that I always liked them. I thought Mara Jade was a cool concept. And then Jorah Saboth was interesting. And this is when we really got to see clones. Well before we knew what the clones actually were. But the way they were formulated and that the reveal of them in this book was really cool and suspenseful. It's always been something that is an incredibly important aspect of the mythology of Star Wars overall. And I don't know, I need to revisit it very, very soon. I mean, once I get free time, which I don't know when that's going to happen. but it just seems like one that is worth going back to the well for because it did so many things for the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and you brought up Jorah Saboth, and I remember seeing him on the cover of that book and thinking, when I heard there was clones, I was like, is this a clone of Obi-Wan Kenobi? Because you had this wild-looking character with this beard, and I figured, hey, maybe he just got left on a deserted planet somewhere. And the other thing about that book that I kind of enjoyed was the Thrawn-Pelion relationship, and it was almost a kind of a Holmes and Watson type of a deal going on, where Thrawn would just take a look at some art and discern what was going on with this race or the species or what the rebellion was going to do. And he just kind of had Pelion there trying to keep up, struggling to keep up with the logic. And it was a great homage to what we saw in those movies with just some nice twists thrown on it, with borrowing from some other genres as well. Yeah,
and nice, crisp writing as well.
Absolutely.
If
you don't want to take the big bite, to start reading the book again or listening to the audiobook, there is a short, all of the, there's the 30-year anniversary or the 25-year anniversary of the silver one that came out the most recently. On audio, there's Timothy Zahn's annotated the notes that he kind of put in the margins. There's a whole separate audio performance of just Timothy Zahn reading his explanations for where he came up with names and planets. And it's, I think it's an hour long or something like that. It's short, but it's really cool. So if that's something you just kind of want to use to whet your appetite, I would very much recommend it, because there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff of where he came up with names and locations and how he had to deal with an idea that he had, but Lucasfilm said, no, you can't do that. And so he had to change different. For some reason, I feel like the Nogri were kind of an evolving idea because Lucasfilm was putting some restrictions on him. And so it's really fascinating. It's something that you should give a listen to if you're interested.
Wow. It's sort of like a director's cut or a commentary. Yeah. That's cool. I never did really gravitate towards the Nogri version in Star Wars Rebels. I think it's because I just liked the version in the novel so much better than that. Wow. Okay, very good. Well, let's go ahead and take another break. We will come back, and Tom will bring us the latest Star Wars news. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
As I'm scrolling through Facebook and Twitter recently, I am seeing over and over again MEI and Mouse Fan Travel and all the great things Becky Menke and everyone at Mouse Fan Travel is doing to promote all the amazing things coming to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and the Disney Cruise Lines. We love MEI and Mouse Fan Travel because of the signature service and expert advice that they use to help clients maximize their vacation time and dollar. They help your family enjoy everything the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer, help plan every detail, and share invaluable tips. Be sure to go to www.mousefantravel.com today and let them know Coffee with Kenobi sent you. It is time for the latest in Star Wars news, and Tom is here with us. Tom, it's been kind of a crazy week for Star Wars. Not a lot going on, but I have a feeling you've got some good stuff for us.
Yeah, I've got a couple stories today. So first is writer Kieran Gillen announced that issue 67 of the main title Star Wars comic will be his last. Gillen took over the book from Jason Aaron on issue 38 and took us back to Jeddah. He worked through the political alliances of Queen Trios, the Rebel Alliance, and Darth Vader. Also, the invasion of Mon Cala that brought Admirals Raddus and Akbar into the Rebel Alliance, and the Hope Dies storyline. In a letter released last week, Gillen wrote that he has 3 issues left to write in The Scourge of Sho Turun. He doesn't have any plans to write anything else in Star Wars, and he states, quote, "I suspect I've said all I wanted about the characters in comics, at least in this period anyway." The 4th installment of the current arc titled The Escape hit the shelves of comic book stores on January 9th.
And I think this is certainly a mixed bag for a couple of reasons. for one, I'm glad to see him be able to go out on a high note. He certainly left his mark. The Darth Vader series that he did that I was lucky enough to interview him for StarWars.com, I thought that was more impactful and had more important storytelling in it. If anything, this is sort of shining a light, at least for me anyway, on the Star Wars comics. And the numbers play out that Star Wars comics aren't selling like they used to. And they are not impacting me or hitting me the way that they used to when they first started becoming canonical in 2015. I think I'm ready for a bit of a break anyway with it, and it's maybe Gillen is too. I'm not trying to over sensationalize it. I think that he's good. He told his story. He's a very, very intelligent man, a very gifted storyteller, and he wants to tackle something different. And I am glad to hear that if he does return to Star Wars, it sounds like he'd prefer doing it in a different era, because I think we're in a place where we're so oversaturated in the original trilogy that it's becoming harder for me to suspend my disbelief and embrace the verisimilitude of Star Wars storytelling, because Luke, Han, and Leia, it's like they never get a second of peace at all. I understand this is a tumultuous galaxy, but I think we need to progress past the original trilogy storylines and go on to something different, because I feel like it's getting kind of played out. And I don't mean that to sound negative. It's just sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And it pains me because I hate to think that a story has a conclusion to it. Sometimes, especially a story like this, you want it to go on. You want more Luke and Leia, and you want more Han and Chewbacca and Darth Vader and the Empire and the struggle. But I would agree. As I've read these issues, I was really excited with him coming on issue 38, taking us to Jeddah, thinking about like Luke Skywalker walking in the steps of Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso and the others in at the beginning of the Alliance. But in reading through the storylines, it kind of became, okay, where is this going? Where are we headed? How many, as you mentioned, how many more stories can be told? But when I look back at the summary of his run, there's some really cool things in there, like the Queen Trio story. I love that one.
That's in fact, probably the best one.
I've gone back and read that one a couple of times. But even how Akbar and Lattes come into the Alliance through the invasion of Mancala, and it's been a really good run. And I completely agree, Kieran. I hope he sticks with Marvel. I hope he tells stories in some fashion, Star Wars or not. But it's okay. And I feel like he's walking away, and walking away implies that there's something there. But he's stepping away from the Star Wars story while it's still up. Maybe on the downslide a little bit, but we're not, dredging through, oh my gosh, I have to read another Star Wars comic. He's leaving it in good hands to somebody, and maybe that person will bring it in and have some exciting stories to tell. Or maybe this is where it will end. We don't really have much in the way of what's after this. So yeah, I think that's important news and a great writer on a good story. So our next story tonight or today is, if you haven't checked the Star Wars YouTube Kids channel, it may be worth a look for you. New content, including episodes of Galaxy of Adventures, which we talked about here on Coffee with Kenobi news segment, was released. Fun facts that are 1-minute videos of interesting Star Wars facts about things like Princess Leia, Millennium Falcon, lightsabers, among other topics. And then a new segment called Star Wars by the Numbers. In the first edition of Star Wars by the Numbers, they assembled a lengthy montage of about 6 to 7 minutes, which counted how many times the characters in the Star Wars saga from The Phantom Menace to The Last Jedi, including Solo and Rogue One, how many times the characters said yes or no. Have you seen by the numbers? It is a staggering difference. Yeses were the 196 times, and no's were a staggering 647 times. Now, I'm not sure what this tells us about our favorite saga and the characters, but I guess there it is nonetheless.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. I think being a person who's very much a fan of words and repetition, especially in literature, I think there's a lot you could probably do and break down with this thing. So it brings two things to light for me. One, the staggering amount of time that it must have taken to edit and create this video beautifully and seamlessly it's very much sort of it walks through all of the films, as you mentioned, is stunning, and I can't imagine the amount of time that was spent creating this thing. So kudos to Scott Bromley and everyone at StarWars.com in the video section for that, because it truly is a very, very well done piece of work. The other part of me shows very much that I'm kind of in a place now where I feel like I'm getting too much Star Wars. This is clearly something that a certain sect of fandom will love, and I think that's wonderful, and I embrace that, and I applaud that. But recording this show with show 161 of Coffee with Kenobi with Dennis and Randy is helping me sort of find where I am at in my Star Wars sweet spot. And some of that is, of course, besides the films, is the nostalgia of reliving the Legends line books that really impacted me. So this video may have a similar nostalgic feel for people of a certain generation years down the road. But for me, I feel like I'm in a place where I'm getting too much Star Wars information. And that, I hope that doesn't sound terrible. It's just sort of where I'm at.
No, I don't think it sounds terrible at all. And you make a great point where, how much is enough. But I do take it from sort of another point of view. I think when it comes to fans like you and I and many of our Coffee with Kenobi listeners, former co-hosts and things, we've had 40 years to let Star Wars wash over us, and we have all of that background knowledge. And so something like, behind the numbers may seem, or at least in this case, the yeses and the nos may seem a little trivial and kind of like, that's cool, that was well done, but what does that mean for me? And did I really need that? And so my other point of view comes from our fans of the new generation, are, the kids and even adults who've stepped into the Star Wars galaxy, maybe with Force Awakens. Rey is their hero, or maybe even came on with the giving something like Rogue One that was a one shot that they don't have to know the rest of the Star Wars story to watch, and that drew them in. These types of things I think are really important for those fans, because we've got those 40 years of history of Star Wars and understanding, and today's fans that are coming on board in the last 5 years, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they've had films, kind of shoved down their throats, and not in any necessarily negative way, other than that's what society today wants, is the now generation. I got to have it now. This movie ended. What's going to happen? And I want this, in 2 months. And so they've gotten that. And so what they don't have, though, is that history. And so things like this, the Star Wars YouTube Kids channel, where Galaxy of Adventures, I've watched them, but after watching them, I was kind of like, that was cool. That was interesting, but it wasn't something I necessarily needed. But my kids, they needed that. When they watched Star Wars by the numbers, my oldest, who's seen all the movies, was having just so much fun saying, oh, that's Phantom Menace, and that's Attack of the Clones, and I wonder what was that movie? I missed that one. We got to rewind that and see what that is. That's building history for them. And so I'm with you, Dan. The oversaturation for our generation, seems that it's there, but I think it's really important for our new generation.
No, that's true. Very well said. And like I said, 20 years down the road, Kaylee and Kelsey might be on a Coffee with Kenobi or a Star Wars podcast of their own, talking about how this is something that reminded them so much of what they love about fandom. And that's all great. And maybe it is generational. Very good. Thank you for expressing that the way that you did.
Oh, you bet.
So let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we will reveal our number one selections for our favorite books from the Star Wars Legends line. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Coffee with Kenobi.
One Nation Coffee is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. I start my morning every day with One Nation Coffee because it is the best. You can start your coffee subscription so you never miss out on the best coffee in the galaxy by going to www.onenationcoffee.com today. Plus, enter the code Kenobi10 to set up a coffee subscription and save 10% off your first order.
back, and we are down to our number one choice for our top 5 favorite books from the Legends line. This has certainly added a lot more to my reading list here in these two talk about it. Plus, the active conversation, this Socratic conversation, this style, helps you to kind of think about things in different ways, which is why I love this medium of podcasting anyway. So, Randy, I think I know what you're going to go with for number one, but I'm not 100% sure. What is your number one choice?
I'm curious to see where the confidence comes from. That so I'll throw it out there. Darth Bane. Is that a surprise, or is that what you were thinking?
I had a feeling.
Okay,
I had
cool.
a feeling.
All right, so Darth Bane, the very first book. If we're only if we're choosing one book, the very first book. The idea of Drew Karpyshyn and all of the research that he did, bringing in the old comics, the Jedi versus Sith comics, and I don't know which came first there because I'm mostly into books. I'm kind of fringely into comics, so I don't know which came first there. But just incorporating the thought bomb and the development of the Rule of Two and how how that book was referred to by Terry Brooks, or that material was referred to by Terry Brooks in the novelization of The Phantom Menace, and how that all fits with Plagueis, but Darth Bane and the development of a character that goes from basically a glorified slave, a paid slave, basically, to a Sith Lord by the end. The Sith Ari, his training and all the. It's just a great book. He did a great job. It's centered around a Sith Lord, and the Sith is the protagonist in the book, and I love it. I love that book, and I know there's probably a lot of people that do agree.
Would you believe I've never read it?
This is like
I want to. It's just only so many hours in a day.
I said, there's over 200 books, and when I say over 200 books, that includes like the Young Jedi Knights novels and the like small little Fear of the Galaxy books, and so for every big like pillar kind of hardcover novel, there's a bunch of like youth young readers novels that came out, and so there are so many Legends books that we could have very easily missed each other on all three of these lists and not had anything in common. But if Darth Bane isn't on your list, or if you haven't read it, that I'm sure any of us that are picking 1 through 5, and you've kind of heard it already as listeners, you all that are listening, you can hear our enthusiasm and our love for these books. And we could interchange any of these. I would take Revelation as a 1, or Traitor as a 1, or Outbound Flight as a 1. And very easily, none of this stuff we're willing to die on any of these hills, because it's all such good stuff.
Well said. Very well said. Wow, you hit a home run, and you did a walk-off there, didn't you? All right, Dennis, I can honestly say I'm not sure what you're going to pick. Unless you clone what Randy just said, I'm not sure what you're going to pick for your number 1. But what is your number 1?
I'm going to double down on what Randy just said and go with Darth Bane by Drew Karpyshyn. I like this book for a lot of reasons. It actually presents a sympathetic Sith, for one thing, and it's kind of a dark take on the hero's journey. As Randy was alluding to, you got a character who is born into harsh circumstances and through acts of desperation finds himself enrolled in the Sith army. And you can't fault him for his logic for getting there and thinking that he's actually fighting on the right side of things while he's there. And as his powers begin to manifest and he is attempting to look out for his fellow soldiers, he's forced to make some decisions that put him into further harm's way. And eventually his power manifests to a point that he gets taken to the Sith Academy. And it's not, when you think about these characters and that Drew Karpyshyn wrote for the Knights of the Old Republic video games and stuff like that, I kind of expected going into this that we were just going to get this larger than life character that was just going to dominate and slaughter his way through this book. And that's not the case at all. Bane is a character who struggles and who fails. And then he, instead of just using brute force all the time, he collects himself, he falls back, he evaluates what's going on, he figures out a strategy, he studies, and he figures out how to get better and how to win the next time. And when it's best to use deception and when it is best just to use brute strength. And so it's a captivating book. I may have read Path of Destruction more than any other book that I've read in the Legends line. And in the past 2 years, it's become especially satisfying because it was one of the first Legends books that I gave to my oldest son to read. And he's read the trilogy as well. And we've talked about them frequently and often. And, focusing on this one book, it's fantastic and it's a great story in and of itself. But when you get to that trilogy in the end, and to the third book in the end of it, there's some room for debate. And we've done that. We've debated what the end of that book means and what it meant for the Sith and things going forward. And I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, you're not going to find too many fans of the Legends on it aren't going to put that in their top 2 or 3, I would say.
Oh, it definitely deserves to be there.
Very cool. All right, well, I guess I'm going to have to – you guys are killing me. I'm going to have to move this to the top of the list too. Very good. Well, my number one, do either of you know what my number one is going to be?
Oh, man. Let me,
I'll give you it is a Star Wars book.
Okay, all right. So we got that narrowed down.
Down to about 200 now.
Yeah, good. My number one is Darth Plagueis.
All right.
James Luceno, of course. It's a brilliant book. I got this for Easter. This was an Easter present from my wife when we were first married. And this was also, again, I seemed to tie a lot of my Star Wars into things that were going on in my life at the time. While I read this book, when I started it, I remember thinking it was a little slow, and I wasn't as interested in Darth Plagueis as a character, which I thought was a problem since the book was about him. And then they introduced Sheev Palpatine, who wasn't called Sheev at the time. I think that came from the Tarkin Babel. And I thought, oh, okay, we are going to go to that far. I was sort of expecting the Palpatine section of Darth Plagueis' story to be a sequel, and it wasn't. So at first I was a little thrown by that. And then as they showed his training and his evolution, the book became more and more about Palpatine. I liked the meta commentary on the fact that while Palpatine was taking over Darth Plagueis and his role as a Sith Lord, he was taking over Darth Plagueis' book. I thought that was fascinating and in a very carefully constructive way to create a narrative. And the first sequence when Palpatine really unleashes the Force and kills his family and the lack of remorse that he has, and then they show him training Darth Maul, recruiting him. Recruiting is probably a generous word. And then how the book ends and introduces this concept of what Anakin Skywalker's creation might have been like, which is something that's been heavily debated ever since Darth Plagueis came out. And even though it's non-canonical, boy, if I could just pick one to be canon, it would be this one. If it's not, that means they're going to make something even better if they do ever tell that story. But it's rich. The prose, this is why Luceno's a master, because this book is written at a very high level. It's a very elevated language in the construction and in the presentation. More so than some of his other books, and that's just because I think that was the style he was going for. It was more formalized and powerful, and I thought it was incredible. While this book was going on, and when I really finished it, I was actually on the beach on vacation with my family in Florida, and this is when Corey and I were creating Coffee with Kenobi. I remember walking on the beach. I had just finished reading Plagueis, and Corey sent me a text with the image of the final logo we decided on for Coffee with Kenobi. And so I always associate the creation of our show with finishing Darth Plagueis. So that's my number one.
Great choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I wondered, Dennis, if you would agree, I think I would too. My top 5 Plagueis isn't in that top 5, but if I did have that, we're making a list of our favorite Legends books. But if I got an opportunity to choose, I would want Plagueis to be, if there's one book I had to choose to become canon, I would want Plagueis to be that one.
It makes perfect sense for it to be a canon novel. I agree with you both on that. because it just fits so well. And I can't think of anything that it really contradicts that we have in our new revised canon right now either. And it's another one, if you listen to the audiobook narrated by Jonathan Davis, it's a fantastic listen as well as a fantastic read. Just, however you consume it, you're in for a great experience.
The Plagueis book was narrated not.
Oh, you're right. It's by different Davis.
It's actually the butler from the Nanny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yes. Yeah. And he's also in The Hunt for Red October. He's around, he's one of the U.S. officers on the Dallas, I think it is the submarine. And I can't remember I can't remember his name. But
the narrator was Daniel Davis. I got the wrong Davis, but he did a fantastic job with it.
Absolutely.
He did a great, because Plagueis spends so much time with some sort of a breath mask on after he gets injured in the one attack, and the special effects that they put in that novel, like any Star Wars audiobook, are fantastic. But it's great as a book. It's great as an audiobook, however you choose to consume it.
Oh, absolutely. Very, very, very good. Well, guys, this was amazing. This was a very exciting. I think we injected a bit of enthusiasm into my desire to read these books, because let's be honest, for a while in between Revenge of the Sith and before we knew there was The Force Awakens, this was our highlight when there was a new Star Wars book, because that was part of continuing that story, whether it was canonical or not. It was what was going to get all of us talking as fans. It's very, very powerful, and it's brought a lot of people together. And each of you do that on your podcast as well. I would love to give you both a chance to talk about your amazing podcast. And Randy, you have, of course, Legends Library, which I would love for you to plug. Plus, you've got something else that I'd like you to plug as well.
Okay. I think this might be kind of interesting for you guys to hear. Besides, we have a Legends Library is basically a book club, and we go through a different Legends book every month. And we have recently added, we used to do this thing we did it once a year for, I think it was year 2 and year 3. We did this thing called the Legends Library card. And we kind of did a drawing, and we were so very fortunate, but we did a drawing. If you posted on Facebook or you shared a review on iTunes or whatever, we did a drawing, and we would choose the one person to join us, and they got to pick the book, right? And so we ended up with Cole Peel 1 year, and Lisa Mountain was the other one. They are now permanent residents. So the four of us, they are so knowledgeable. I'm just the guy that records. They are so knowledgeable. We joke around with Lisa that she has so many notes that she might as well just open the book. That's how many notes she has when she breaks down a book and studies a book and gets ready to talk about it. So Legends Library, we've got an episode coming out in a couple days. But just for fun, I thought I would read this for you. So after 4 years of, I think it's 4 years of doing Legends Library, here's how the popularity of the episodes break down. I thought you guys might dig this. So from 5 to 1 is a Betrayal, part of the Legends or Legacy of the Force. Annihilation, which is written by Drew Karpyshyn. Revan, Rogue Squadron, and the most popular episode we've ever had is Bloodlines, written by Karen Travis. And then those are the top 5. That's the listeners speaking and the listeners listening. So that's the Legends Library official top 5, and then we throw one in there that's this wishful drinking that I did a very special episode with Jay Krebs, and we talked about the book Wishful Drinking, written by Carrie Fisher, and so that's Legends Library, and thank you so much for bringing up the other project that I'm working on. And I've started what is going to end up, I think, to be it's going to be a network, I think, because we've got some other people interested in joining us with their own podcast. But I'm doing something called the Parent Workshop Podcast. And what that is basically it's helping parents raise their kids through the lens of a Christian worldview. And the most important thing, our theme here is that we're responding to the world and responding to this culture with truth, but most importantly with love. And so, how do we teach our kids about the really tough topics that our culture is struggling with right now? And it's been an honor to have people listen to that. And it really is a labor of love. And I do thank you so much for allowing me to share that, Dan.
Oh my gosh! Of course, when you shared the news with me, I was very excited because it's wonderful, and I think it's important to put that out there because I think you are a good role model for people, young and old. So thank you for doing that.
And thank you.
And Dennis, where can people find you and hear your awesome podcast with two of my favorite Star Wars fans? One more, much more calm and serene than the other, but both equally entertaining and enjoyable.
Yeah, they're quite the pair that I work with. You can find Starship Sabers and Scoundrels, which features myself, Darth Taxis, and Jay Krebs, who Randy was just referring to, over on the Retrozap Podcast Network. It's a bi-weekly show, but we've been doing a lot of bonus episodes lately covering Resistance, anything else that we just happen to be up to. And so that comes out usually on Tuesdays. We're getting ready to talk about some Clone Wars, the Jedi Crash and Defenders of Peace episodes from season 1. So you can look for that next week. You can also find me each month on Jedi Journals talking with Jay Shepard about a current trade paperback collecting recent Marvel Star Wars comics. And with the return of Star Trek Discovery, my wife and I will be reviving Warp Trail. So you can look for that in the next week as well.
Sounds amazing. Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I will share with you a great email and we will close out the show. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Before we get to email, I want to thank our CWK sponsor, One Nation Coffee and Mouse Fan Travel. Be sure to support them the way they support our podcast, and remember to listen to new and archive shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Spreaker, Overcast, Blog Talk Radio, Player FM, or our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com, or wherever you enjoy listening to your favorite shows. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, where you can find some past videos of our CWK Coffee Chat, Pinterest, and Tumblr, and we'd love for you to check us out there. Be sure to listen to our CWK family of shows too, including Legends Library, Resistance Reactions, Comics with Kenobi, and Lattes with Leia. Please leave a review for each of their shows as well, and be sure to subscribe to each of them individually, as they all have their own feeds now. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Network, as well as on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. Don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to help support the show, as well as get access to CWK Pour Over, which is our podcast, our weekly podcast, not heard anywhere else. There are also t-shirts, coffee mugs, and so many more opportunities and ways for you to not only support the show, but get something pretty cool out of it as well. From Jared Cantor, who posted this on our CWK Patreon page. Really amazing guests on the latest episode, show number 160. From my point of view, I am most interested in episode 9, but I feel like that has to be the default answer. From there, I think I'm next the most excited for the Clone Wars to be wrapped up. I'm interested in The Mandalorian, but because that is such a new form of Star Wars, I have a bit more trepidation about it. Overall, though, I'm confident in the people who will execute it. As a big literature person, I am, of course, very excited for the novels that have been announced for 2019. I'm also hopeful that with Episode 9 of the Skywalker saga coming to a close, the literature arm of Lucasfilm will finally be free to delve into some more background to Episode 7, namely Luke, Kylo, and Snoke. The other thing to me about 2019 is that it is going to be so jam-packed, especially at the end. But I also really wonder about 2020. Are we going to get another film this year, or is that going to be a year where they let things lie and prepare for another busy year in 2021? I guess what this ties into is that I have a concern that the future of the film Star Wars saga is not going to be as rosy as everyone predicts. I just have always wondered, since Solo, whether we are going to find out the general movie-going audience ultimately will not be that into Star Wars films that come out with any regularity, and that the base of Star Wars fans is not large enough to support a yearly Star Wars film. Thank you very much for your email, Jared. There's a lot of good things you bring up here. 2019, yeah, I agree. Episode 9 is definitely the one that seems to be, I don't know if it's the biggest. Well, it probably is the biggest because we're talking about the final movie in the Skywalker saga, at least is how things stand today at the time of this recording. So that is a tricky one. The Mandalorian I'm not really trepidatious about because I don't have anything emotionally invested in it yet. I don't really know any of these characters, so I'm just going to take that one with a grain of salt and look forward to the great storytelling that I know Dave Filoni and crew will bring for us. Definitely way with you on the probability of the universe being expanded and getting to finally find out about what happened before Episode 7 with Luke and Kylo, and Snoke too, for sure. But definitely Luke and Kylo. There's so much untapped storytelling in that training montage. Well, it's not really a montage. It's not like we're watching Rocky or something like Creed, although those are great films, by the way. But this is not a podcast about that. I think just seeing Luke and Kylo train together and Luke trying to start this Jedi Academy, boy, is that going to be amazing. I hope they really do something special with that, whether it is in book form or animated or maybe films, I don't know, but that is something I think a lot of us are really going to be looking forward to. And then as far as what's going to happen in 2020, I'm not sure. I have a feeling that Celebration will reveal all of that for us. I would be okay with the year off of Star Wars movies. I feel sort of like that happened because Solo, even though it was released in May, that seems like a lifetime ago. And I hope that they continue to just give the best Star Wars stories that they can, and to me, that they already have. So we will see. I think that a movie could certainly be supported just by Star Wars fans alone, but that's the beauty of Star Wars. When people go, they bring their Star Wars friends, their Star Wars family, but they also bring people who maybe are just casual fans or just moviegoers or family members that aren't necessarily concerned with what's going to happen next in the Star Wars saga, but they love going to the movies. And of course, once you go, you become hooked into this incredible saga that we love so very, very much. So again, Jared, thank you so much for your email. Thank you to Randy Therio, Dennis Keithley, and Tom Gross for joining me today. And thank you to each and every one of you for always joining us for a cup of coffee. We will be back next week for more Star Wars conversation with some of your favorite Star Wars personalities. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.